Hello. I was watching the social media and the name of a young man by the name of AMIR LOCKE. The indication is that he had been killed by Minneapolis police in a raid. We saw the videotape and it looked, based upon the tape, the camera recording, that the young man was murdered. As spokesman and advocate of basic human rights for all people, a title I gave myself because this is my interest, I would like to just say to the Minneapolis community how sad it is that we have to continue to endure these types of oppressive acts. And yet, whether we like it or not, they still remain. I'm sure we all agree that cops are the response to problems that have been ignored, problems that have been given little attention as far as correcting. Well, cops are very seldom a solution to problems such as that. These are failed systemic social and economic justice concerns. And so as a spokesman, I would say that if we spend a lot of time dealing with the important thing of our kids being killed by cops, and that is very important, but I think it's kind of missed the mark because our problem is bigger than that. Our problem has to do with social and economic justice. We have seen here in Minneapolis, we have seen here within the United States over the past several years that it has been highlighted the fact that we as people of color and blacks have been treated as second-class citizens, and we still are. We've seen the injustices that have been perpetrated against the people of color, and we've seen the promises made but no positive actions taken. And so we sit back and we watch things change where someone, a white supremacist, decides to take over the country, and this whole platform is directed at pointing a finger as people of color as being the problem. And that all we got to do is stay divided and allow the white people to have all the power. And what will that say about us? I think it says about us is that we should wake up and recognize this is not about politics any longer. This is really just, as we say, white supremacy. Yes, they're using that, but actually what's going on is that there's a war going on between evil and righteousness. And I suggest to anybody that whenever I'm talking to them, whatever the seemingly small problem or big problem as it might be, the total problem is something that we can deal with that addresses the little problem and the big problem and all the problems. And this is what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. In Minneapolis, I would suggest that if the people in Minneapolis and St. Paul and all over the state really went to their leaders. I watched how the mayor and the acting police chief walked out when you were asking questions. There was no accountability, as one of the aldermen were referring to. But this is the way it's going to always happen. As long as the power is in their hands, this is the way it's always going to happen. So I would say to anybody that's progressive and thinking about waking up, is you recognize this, what you have to do is take back your power. Right now, we grew into a system that had already delegated our power as we were coming up to a system whether we wanted to give it or not. But understanding, we see what's happening before us. We have a choice. Do we want to continue giving our power away? Do we want to claim our power? And if we're going to claim our power away from the system that sets up that's working against us, how do we utilize our power in such a way that it won't repeat what we're running from and give us what we really want? Then we have to focus on what is it that we really want. First of all, we want to deal with those things that are coming amongst us, dealing with survival, dealing with our security. And what is that number one thing? Number one thing we're talking about: food and clothing and shelter and education and healthcare. These are number one concerns. And we must think about that as far as addressing that for all of us Minnesotans and all of us as Americans. And how do we do that? We do that by taking those who benefit from these and engage them in the process of creating. And what the careers that they engage in is the one that they choose, the career that give them their greatest joy, where people say, I can't believe I'm being paid for what I'm doing. That's what I'm talking about. People who actively engage themselves in creating an abundance in the reservoir of goods and services that there is not enough room to contain, but we're not holding it, we're giving it out to all of us, because now we are using our power to make sure that our needs are met, to guarantee to ourselves peace and prosperity and freedom and joy, fulfillment of our dreams, that our needs, our wants, and our desires might be met. Focus on these kinds of things, do these kinds of things, I suggest, and do all of this, my friends, without having to resort back to what's being used today: lies and cheating and crime and violence and terror and racism and bigotry. It seems like that should be easy for you to turn yourselves away from. And yes, it will require change. It will require systemic changes. It will require that we step outside of the box, utilizing the good things that do exist, and promising ourselves the opportunity to open up and use our imagination to create everything that's missing, realizing that life is a natural thing. All of these laws and stuff that people come up with through the political process is something just to deviate from the truth. And so when I think about what's going on in Minneapolis and the rest of the world, I would say that we should commit ourselves to one side or the other. Are we going to be for that which is right? And it's not right, sisters and brothers, for us to think about some of us. We have to think about all of us. If we can only think about some of us, there's no difference between us and everybody else. Righteousness is inclusive, even your enemies. You can include them, and you'll win most of them. And the ones that you can't win, big deal. Love them anyway. Like you love your children when they're crazy. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to say that to Minneapolis. I want you to know that I am your brother in your efforts to be successful in whatever you choose to do. Personally, I'm committed that I understand that if you're not willing to pay the price for the best life, you're not really deserving of it. And what do I mean by that? Don't let the fear of death clamp chains on you and tie you in bondage for your eternity. Just a thought. Thanks.